Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Pod. My name is Marco.
And I'm Erica.
And today with Erica, we have a very aggressive lesson for you today.
That's true. We've got a revolutionary lesson.
Yes, today at English Pod, we're protesting. So, Erica, why don't you tell us what a protest is?
Well, when you protest something, you go into the streets and show your disagreement.
Right. And you yell and you have signs and everyone's just protesting.
And the news comes, and if it's not clear now, it'll be clear after the dialogue, I'm sure.
Definitely. So why don't we start with our vocabulary preview?
Vocabulary preview.
We have two words in our vocabulary preview today. The first is bankrupt.
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 So if a company goes bankrupt, what happens?
It means the company doesn't have any more money.
So it can't pay salaries.
It can't pay
Can't
anything.
pay its bills, yeah. So basically, if it's bankrupt, it's probably going to close.
Exactly.
Okay, our second word today is bailout.
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 B-A-I-L, bailout.
So a bailout is when the government gives money to a company that is about to go bankrupt.
That's true. It's emergency money that will help save the company. Well, these two words are taken directly from our dialogue. And in today's dialogue, we're going to bring you live to a newscast.
Right, so why don't we just listen to the dialogue?
This is Action 5 news reporter Sarah O'Connell reporting live from Washington, D.C., where a protest has broken out. Thousands of angry citizens are protesting against the proposed bailout of the auto manufacturing industry. Sir, Sarah O'Connell, Channel 5 News, can you tell us what's happening?
Yeah, we're here because we feel this is an injustice. The financial irresponsibility of big business has to stop. We're here to show the government that we don't like the way they're spending our tax dollars.
Sir, but what exactly is making everyone so angry?
It's an absolute outrage, Sarah. The U.S. government wants to give $25 billion of taxpayers' money to the auto industry. These are companies that have been mismanaged and are now nearly bankrupt.
I see. But many supporters of the bailout argue that it could help save the jobs of millions of hardworking Americans.
That may be true, and I, for one, don't want to see anyone lose their job. But how can these CEOs ask for a bailout when they're making millions of dollars? And then they have the nerve to fly to Washington in private jets. This costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're asking for money. That is just not right.
Good point. This is Sarah O'Connell reporting live from Washington, D.C. Back to you, Tom.
Wow, these people are really angry.
I think they're furious.
Well, I think they have some good points, and we'll talk about that later. But now,
It's time for language takeaway.
Language takeaway.
Yeah, there was some great language in this dialogue. A lot of language we use to express our anger.
right. And one of those words, and the first one for language takeaway, is injustice.
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 An injustice.
So an injustice is something that isn't fair.
It's totally unfair.
It's unfair, yeah. This is an injustice. Let's look at our second word, outrage.
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 An outrage.
So Erica, why don't you give us an example on how you would use outrage?
There's no more coffee. This is an outrage.
Yeah, there we go. That's an outrage. Okay,
Let's go to our next word now.
breakout.
Break out.
Breakout.
Break out.
So we have some great examples on how we use breakout, so let's listen.
Example 1.
War is broken out in Antarctica as countries of the world fight for control of the icy continent.
Example 2.
Officials are warning that fighting could break out in the border regions.
Example 3.
A forest fire broke out last night.
Well, this is a wonderful phrasal verb that means...
To begin suddenly.
Okay, so I think that's pretty clear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Break out.
Let's go to our next word now.
Mismanaged.
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 So when something is mismanaged, it's
Not managed properly.
managed poorly.
Poorly, right.
Yeah. Our final word today is
Have the nerve to.
have the nerve to.
Have the nerve to.
I think this one also is a little bit difficult to understand.
Yeah, but we have some great examples prepared for you, so let's listen to them.
Example 1.
I've been in love with you since the 3rd grade, but I didn't have the nerve to tell you.
Example 2.
I don't believe it. You have the nerve to ask me for money when you know I've just lost my job.
Example 3.
What? You have the nerve to bring your new girlfriend to visit my mother.
So have the nerve to is like dare to do something, right?
Yeah, how dare you?
Yeah.
Have the nerve to. It's like, I can't believe you would do that.
Yeah, I think that's quite clear. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of great words in our dialogue today. And also, we have some really interesting grammar in today's dialogue.
Right, so today, let's look at some grammar breakdown.
Grammar breakdown.
In this section, grammar breakdown, we show you a particular grammar structure and explain a little bit about how that structure affects meaning. So it's not really about getting the grammar perfectly right. It's about understanding the meaning.
Right. And in today's lesson, we saw some really great examples on how we use the present perfect tense.
Let's listen to an example from the dialogue.
Where a protest has broken out. Where a protest has broken out.
See the verb here, break out, like a protest has broken out, happened in the past, right?
Right?
And it's still going on now.
Exactly.
So present perfect is used when we're talking about an event that happened in the past and is continuing on now.
Exactly.
Or is continuing to affect now.
Exactly.
Okay, I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, but now if you want to indicate or if you want to demonstrate that the action has finished, the event is over, then you would say it like this.
A protest broke out. A protest broke out.
In this form, you see that the protest is over. It happened yesterday already.
Right, and I think it's really emphasizing the fact that it is no longer affecting the present moment.
Exactly. So remember the difference between present perfect and simple past. Now, if you want to know more about these tenses, present perfect and simple past, be sure to go to our website at EnglishPod.com. In the grammar section, you can find some more great examples and a really clear explanation on how these tenses are formed. But now we are ready to listen to our dialogue a second time.
This is Action 5 news reporter Sarah O'Connell reporting live from Washington, D.C., where a protest has broken out. Thousands of angry citizens are protesting against the proposed bailout of the auto manufacturing industry. Sir, Sarah O'Connell, Channel 5 News, can you tell us what's happening?
Yeah, we're here because we feel this is an injustice. The financial irresponsibility of big business has to stop. We're here to show the government that we don't like the way they're spending our tax dollars.
Sir, but what exactly is making everyone so angry?
It's an absolute outrage, Sarah. The U.S. government wants to give $25 billion of taxpayers' money to the auto industry. These are companies that have been mismanaged and are now nearly bankrupt.
I see. But many supporters of the bailout argue that it could help save the jobs of millions of hardworking Americans.
That may be true, and I, for one, don't want to see anyone lose their job. But how can these CEOs ask for a bailout when they're making millions of dollars? And then they have the nerve to fly to Washington in private jets. This costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're asking for money. That is just not right.
Good point. This is Sarah O'Connell reporting live from Washington, D.C. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, Erica, so what do you think about this situation?
About the bailout of the auto industry.
Yes.
I think it's a bad idea.
Why?
There's so many reasons. I mean, I don't think it's fair for us as taxpayers. Well, I guess I'm not really an American taxpayer, but I don't think it's fair for the taxpayers to have to pay for the mismanagement of these companies. I mean, they've got so much debt. They've produced cars that nobody really wants to buy, and now they're in trouble, and it's not our money that should be spent on saving them.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, but you do have to take into consideration the fact that if these companies go bankrupt, thousands of people will lose their jobs. And not only the people that work at the factories, but also people that work for other companies that supply these factories.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, Marco, but at the same time, we can't support an industry that isn't working properly. I mean, if one of these companies goes bankrupt, it's going to be terrible, but it will force the other two companies, perhaps, to manage themselves better, to streamline and become more efficient. I just think it will be better in the future.
Well, it could be, but also maybe all three companies can go bankrupt. It would be sad because the American auto industry is a symbol of prosperity.
Yeah.
It's also the symbol of like the American culture in general.
I guess that's true.
So it would be a shame for it to go bankrupt because everyone owns a car in the United States, or most people, and it's just something that we can't lose. But it is an interesting topic, and we also want to know your opinions about this.
Yeah.
In the global arena of civic action, two contrasting currents have long defined protest rhetoric and tactics: the forthright, unapologetic declamations of Western movements and the more nuanced, face-sensitive appeals favored in many Eastern contexts. Though both traditions ultimately seek to awaken public conscience and effect change, they proceed by markedly different rhetorical paths, differences rooted in cultural values around individualism, community harmony, and the relationship between speaker and audience. At its core, Western protest culture prizes directness. Slogans crash like cymbals demanding immediate attention. No justice, no peace. We are the 99%. Or climate justice now signal clear demands, naming the grievance and spelling out the desired remedy in 3 words or fewer. Heated speeches at rallies cut to the chase, conclusion first, evidence second, so that listeners quickly grasp the central claim: we refuse to live under exploitation. Then absorb supporting facts or anecdotes. This claim then support structure reflects a rhetorical ethos inherited from classical rhetoric and Enlightenment ideals, where logical clarity and the individual's right to speak plainly are paramount. In the United States and much of Europe, public demonstrations employ bullhorns and amplified chants. Protest signs use bold fonts and vivid imagery. Civil disobedience thrives on the power of unmistakable, even uncomfortable truths. By contrast, in many East Asian traditions, the art of persuasion often weaves around direct confrontation. Critics invoke historical allusions, moral parables, or poetic metaphors, allowing listeners to draw their own conclusions. A protest flyer might reference the Confucian principle of rectifying the heart, or deploy layered wordplay that gently nudges readers toward recognizing a social ill, rather than lobbing accusations outright. Statements of dissent frequently begin by acknowledging shared values or common goals, establishing rapport before diagnosing the problem, so as to preserve face on all sides. In Japan, for example, activists might circulate petitions that preface their demands with expressions of gratitude or indirect concern. While we deeply appreciate our government's efforts toward economic stability, before presenting the substantive critique, This shape of appeal mirrors a rhetorical sequence in which context and relationships are foreground. First, situate the issue within a framework of mutual respect. Second, hint at the discrepancy. Third, softly suggest the needed correction. These two orientations, outspokenness versus euphemism, do more than determine speech style. They shape entire mobilization strategies. Western movements tend to concentrate in public squares, harnessing spectacle to pressure authorities through sheer visibility. Eastern protests, mindful of social harmony, often rely on staggered, decentralized gatherings, quiet sit-ins inside government offices, or carefully choreographed symbolic acts that send powerful signals without overt disturbance. Each approach draws upon a deeper cultural logic. In the West, protest is a right of the autonomous individual who owes no apology for speaking truth to power. In the East, dissent must be balanced against communal cohesion and the moral imperative to preserve respect even for those one opposes. Examining specific slogans and appeals underlines this contrast. In Madrid's Puerta del Sol, Occupy-style banners read, "They treat us like serfs, we are citizens," cutting through with defiant clarity. In Seoul, a protest against corporate pollution might carry signs that read, "In the garden of life, we cultivate clean air," an image-rich metaphor that implicitly indicts polluters while framing the struggle as a shared responsibility for future generations. Both are urgent calls for change, yet they strike different chords. The former demands immediate redress, the latter invites reflection on broader ethical principles. As we trace the arc from blunt denunciations to delicate allusions, it becomes clear that neither style is inherently superior. Rather, each reflects a calibrated response to local expectations about how grievances should be aired. Western activists count on shock value and the moral weight of an unclouded indictment. Eastern organizers leverage subtlety to draw on long-standing traditions of harmony and indirect dialogue. In doing so, they ensure that the very act of protest resonates with the audience's deepest sense of how public discourse ought to proceed. In the next section, we will explore how these divergent rhetorical blueprints, direct claim structures on one hand, context-rich preludes on the other, manifest in core language patterns for making requests, issuing remonstrances, and forging solidarity. By mapping out the signature templates and tonal calibrations of Western and Eastern protest speech, we will see how each tradition balances urgency with cultural conventions, and how modern movements increasingly blend these modes in a globalized information landscape. Moving from broad cultural orientations to the nuts and bolts of protest language, we now turn to the heart of rhetorical style itself. Effective demonstrations, whether in New York's Times Square or Tokyo's Hibiya Park, depend not only on the issues at stake, but on how those issues are expressed. Here we examine three key dimensions of protest discourse: sentence rhythm and length, the choice of figures of speech, and the integration of visual and auditory elements. In each case, Western movements tend toward concise, high-impact language, while many Eastern campaigns draw on richer, more elaborate patterns. Yet modern protesters increasingly blend these modes, seeking both clarity and depth in their appeals. 1. Sentence rhythm, short burst commands versus circuitous appeals. One of the clearest markers of Western protest speech is its reliance on short, declarative sentences. A placard at an English-speaking rally might read simply, "End the war now. No justice, no peace. Jobs, not bailouts." Each slogan, rarely more than 4 or 5 words, delivers not just a demand but also a psychological jolt. The high ratio of short sentences, often called burst mode, gives Western protests a staccato rhythm that captures attention in busy public spaces. Speakers echo these patterns in speech, using chanted couplets. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. Whose power lies in rapid repetition and binary structure. In contrast, many Eastern demonstrations have traditionally favored longer constructions that unfold more gradually. A petition circulated at a Bangkok rally, for example, might begin. Whereas the livelihoods of countless citizens have been imperiled by unchecked corporate malfeasance, and whereas our community has exhausted all peaceful means of redress, we, the undersigned, hereby implore the government to enact immediate reforms protecting workers' rights. This single sentence runs to 20 or 30 words, weaving conditionals, whereas, and formal verbs, impel, exhaust, hereby implore, creating a rhetorical circuit that brings the reader gently to the writer's conclusion. Such prosody echoes classical Chinese and Japanese oratory, in which speakers establish context, acknowledge mutual obligations, and only then make their formal appeal. Yet these styles are not immutable. Younger activists in Seoul or Taipei often adopt short burst slogans, #DemocracyNow, #FarmersUnite, recognizing the impact of crisp, mobile-friendly messages. Likewise, Western organizers sometimes intersperse longer, narrative-driven testimonies, survivor stories, historical analogies, within the overall framework of a succinct rally call. The lesson: rhythm matters, but so does adaptability to one's audience and media environment. 2. Figures of speech, repetition and duality versus metaphor and euphemism. Closely tied to sentence length is the use of rhetorical figures. In the West, parallelism and contrast, often in the form of anaphora, repeating the same word at the start of successive clauses, underpin many protest chants. We will not be silenced. We will not be moved. We will not back down. Here the repetition of "we will not" builds momentum, reinforcing collective identity and resolve. Dualities, us versus them, power to the people, frame the struggle in black and white terms, heightening emotional stakes. Eastern traditions have long prized other devices. In Cantonese protests, speakers might invoke parallel metaphors drawn from classical poetry. Like the mountain river carving stone, our patience endures. Like the lotus blooming in mud, our spirit shines. Such imagery relies on readers' cultural memory. Lotus flowers thriving in filth stand for moral purity. Rivers slowly eroding rock symbolize perseverance. Euphemism and oblique reference also play a role. Instead of accusing a minister of corruption outright, activists might speak of clouds gathering over the dragon's palace, an allusion that is understood by those attuned to literary nods. That said, cross-pollination abounds. India's anti-corruption India Shining campaigns blended patriotic metaphors with direct demands, stacking rhymes, stop the loot, take back the root, while Occupy-style gatherings in Hong Kong featured both brief slogans and spoken-word performances rich in metaphor. In our global media space, protests that combine repetition's punch with metaphor's evocative power can resonate most widely. 3. Visual auditory effects, slogan color schemes and choral slogans. Finally, language in protest does not float in isolation. It rides atop visual and sonic designs that amplify its effect. In the United States, red and black lettering on white placards convey urgency and moral clarity. In Germany, protest groups often adopt black and yellow banners invoking hazard tape aesthetics. These color choices mirror the linguistic economy. Each word must stand out against a bold backdrop. Auditory design matters just as much. A synchronized chant, hundreds of voices intoning "CSE Pueda" in unison, creates a visceral sense of solidarity that no single statement could achieve. In India, the campaign anthem Hum Hung Kamyab transforms a protest into participatory song, borrowing the melody of We Shall Overcome, but layering it with regional lyrics. In East Asia, where public noise regulations may be stricter, protest organizers sometimes deploy recorded chants over hidden speakers, creating the illusion of a larger crowd. In Russia's quieter demonstrations, circuits of whispered slogans, passed hand to hand, build a sense of shared secret, turning speech into performance art. Across cultures, the interplay of text, Color and sound transforms language from mere information into a rallying cry. Designers, sound engineers, and choreographers join writers in shaping the protest's linguistic footprint. With these linguistic pillars, sentence rhythm, figures of speech, and multimodal presentation, in view, we next turn to the ultimate test. How do activists put polite or forceful communication into practice amid police lines, media scrutiny, and cross-cultural audiences? In Part 3, we will delve into real-world scenarios, direct action at airports, sit-ins on buses, candlelight vigils in town squares, showing how protest groups calibrate their language and tactics to resonate effectively in diverse settings. The lessons we glean there will complete our picture of global protest as both an art and a science of communication, moving from the mechanics of protest rhetoric to the deeper emotional currents that give demonstrations their staying power. We arrive at a third vital dimension of cross-cultural protest communication: how movements evoke shared values and martial moral authority in ways that resonate both within their own society and, increasingly, on the global stage. Having seen how Western campaigns prize direct, punchy slogans while many Eastern actions have favored layered, elusive appeals, we now ask, what kinds of ethical and emotional framing most move participants to action? When does a protest invoke universal principles, human rights, freedom, equality, to unite disparate groups? And when does it draw on communal traditions, harmony, duty, respect, to reinforce solidarity? How does criticism balance forcefulness against the cultural imperative to preserve social face, even while challenging authority? In what follows, we examine these questions through two interwoven threads. First, the tension between universalist versus communitarian values. Second, the challenge of mounting a credible critique of power without collapsing into disrespect or self-defeat. We illustrate our discussion with three emblematic case studies drawn from around the world. Across the globe, many landmark protest movements have succeeded by invoking ideals that transcend local customs. The belief that every individual deserves dignity and voice. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech did more than decry segregation laws. It called on Americans to live up to the universal promise of equality, enshrined in their own Declaration of Independence. His refrain was neither a riotous demand nor a bitter ultimatum, but rather a compelling invitation to see injustice as antithetical to the nation's founding creed. Similarly, the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests, though tragically crushed, gathered such force precisely because students and workers appealed not merely to Chinese traditions of moral leadership, but to globally resonant principles of representative government and freedom of expression. Banners carried classical quotations alongside English-language slogans: "Democracy now," "Freedom for all." By contrast, other movements have drawn their potency from deeply held communal values, reinforcing bonds of kinship and shared heritage. In many East Asian societies where social harmony and respect for hierarchy remain paramount, protesters have often wrapped their demands in deferential language. Petitions that begin with words of gratitude for past government achievements, or requests phrased as appeals to the authorities' benevolence. Hong Kong's Umbrella Movement, for all its mass sit-ins, also featured tearful testimonies to civic pride, songs of shared identity, and culturally coded references to Chinese literary traditions. Rather than openly demonizing leaders, picketers appealed to the government's own history of serving the people, urging a return to honorable principles. This style, slowly unfolding, relationship-centered, softly persuasive, aims to win hearts without immediately raising the specter of confrontation. Yet neither universalist nor communitarian appeals can stand alone. Where human rights discourse supplies the moral compass, communal narratives supply the social glue. And in both East and West, movements that seamlessly blend the two frequently prove most enduring. In South Africa, Nelson Mandela's African National Congress invoked the nation's own traditions of Ubuntu, "I am because we are," to frame the struggle against apartheid as not just a political conflict, but a collective moral journey toward reconciliation. In Chile's 2019 protests, demonstrators decried economic inequality as a violation of both universal concepts of justice and deeply felt Chilean values of social solidarity, singing national anthems alongside chants for dignidad, dignity. If values animate protest, tone determines its efficacy in confronting power. In cultures where direct challenge is acceptable, demonstrators often employ unambiguous, even incendiary criticism. The Yellow Vest movement in France labeled leaders traitors to the people, squaring off against police in mass marches. In societies where face and social cohesion carry heavy weight, protest language treads a finer line, balancing censure with respect. Taiwanese activists, for instance, may deride policies as unproductive or out of step with public sentiment, rather than branding officials as corrupt or evil. The effect is to preserve the possibility of negotiated change and avoid alienating potential allies. Yet even such restrained critique can gain edge when juxtaposed with carefully chosen moral contrasts. Your promise was of service, your actions speak of self-service, thus casting protest as an act of patriotic correction rather than outright rebellion. We see these dynamics at work in three emblematic protests. In Poland's solidarity movement of the 1980s, shipyard workers combined Catholic social teaching with universal workers' rights, framing their fight as both a defense of Poland's spiritual heritage and an affirmation of universal freedoms. In India's Salt March of 1930, Gandhi harnessed ancient religious symbolism, journeying barefoot to produce salt in defiance of colonial law, while explicitly invoking principles of justice familiar to Western observers. More recently, Australia's climate strikes have fused teenage activists' impassioned appeals to global scientific consensus. There is no planet B. With deep connections to Aboriginal stewardship traditions, creating a movement that is simultaneously universal and locally rooted. As we have seen, emotional resonance and authoritative appeal form the final crucial frontier of protest rhetoric. Universal values draw wide alliances but risk abstractness. Communitarian norms ensure cultural resonance but can narrow scope. Direct critique seizes attention but may provoke backlash. Face-sensitive language invites dialogue but must avoid appearing tepid. The most effective movements navigate these tensions through strategic hybridity, speaking truth to power in tones that respect, not merely rival, their audiences. In our concluding section, we will reflect on how these lessons inform the evolving art of protest in an era of digital mobilization, global media convergence, and ever-shifting cultural fault lines.
The English Pod Audio Review. Listen to the meaning, then say the vocabulary word.
An event where people gather together to show disapproval of something.
Protest.
Start suddenly.
Break out.
The act of saving a company from money problems.
Bailout.
An unfair situation.
Injustice.
Something that is morally wrong.
Outrage.
Manage badly.
Mismanage.
Dare to.
Have the nerve.
Let's try that faster.
Manage badly.
Mismanage.
Something that is morally wrong.
Outrage.
Start suddenly.
Break out.
An event where people gather together to show disapproval of something.
Protest.
Dare to.
Have the nerve.
Something that is morally wrong.
Outrage.
Manage badly.
Mismanage.
An unfair situation.
Injustice.
Dare to.
Have the nerve.
Start suddenly.
Break out.
Something that is morally wrong.
Outrage.
The act of saving a company from money problems.
Bailout.
An event where people gather together to show disapproval of something.
Protest.
Something that is morally wrong.
Outrage.
Now say the word and hear it in a sentence.
Protest. We are organizing a protest this weekend against the tax increase. Bailout. If the government doesn't give a bailout to the auto manufacturing industry, all the factories will close. Break out. Officials are warning that a war could break out between Andorra and Samoa. Injustice. You are not going to give me this job because I'm a woman? That is an injustice. Outrage. The death of millions of starving children is an outrage. Mismanage. Bob, you've really mismanaged this project. Have the nerve. I've been in love with you since the 3rd grade, but I didn't have the nerve to tell you. Protest. We are organizing a protest this weekend against the tax increase. Break out. Officials are warning that a war could break out between Andorra and Samoa. Mismanage. Bob, you've really mismanaged this project.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained some new insights. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. See you next time.